I went over the femur and talked about the head and the surgical neck, the greater trochanter, lesser trochanter. There's a spot along the back, the posterior side, that's the gluteal tuberosity, that's where your glutes attach. Talked about the medial and the lateral condyle. Condyles are where bones connect or touch another bone. And then near it, right above or right below a condyle, you'll find the epicondyle. So this is the medial and lateral epicondyle. So when you're looking at a bone, you do need to know what the front, the anterior, and the posterior are. And you do sort of need to figure out if it's the left or the right so that you can figure out the medial and the lateral. Because the medial is towards the middle, the lateral is on the outside.
How do you tell?
Okay, so on the femur, we can tell because the head makes up the hip, right? So, and I'm going to show you with the pelvis because I didn't put the pelvis in the video. I'm going to show you how you would figure that out. But the hip goes into the socket, okay? And so obviously the hip has to go in towards the belly, right?
Okay.
So this part has to go inside.
So that's...
And then how do I know front and back? If you look at this, thinking about the movement of the knee, okay, if you pick it up, you'll always be allowed to pick it up. It curves like a rocking chair towards the back.
Wait.
Because if you think about how a knee bends, it only bends this way. If your knee bends that way, you've broken it and you're in the hospital. So your knee can only do this movement, and if you look at how it's curved, it can only go like that. So this is the left, and this one is the
Posterior, the front?
posterior is the back. So like, okay,
Post
so
is after.
yes, if you postscript something, you put something after. In Spanish, how do you say before? Antes. Okay, antes is before, and anterior is in the front. It's a before, it's the thing that you see before you see the back. Okay? So, all right, so what I did not go over on the lower body was the pelvic bones. So I'm going to take a minute. I'm going to try to get my recording here. So there are two pelvis bones. They're called coxa or pelvic bones. Okay? And when they don't fuse to each other, there are 3 segments to each pelvis bone. Okay? But when they kind of form, and I have the pelvic girdle, just like the shoulder has a shoulder girdle, there's a pelvic girdle that makes your hips. It's the pelvis that makes the hips, okay? So they meet, the 2 bones meet in the front, and then in the back of this pelvic brim, or this like bowl that's your pelvis, is the sacrum and the coccyx bones. So your tailbone and the sacrum, they make up the back, like the back wall of your pelvis, okay? But the pelvic bones, there's 2 of them, okay? And when I was picking them up, and I was trying to find one of each, a left and a right, and I was frustrated because I kept finding all the lefts, and I knew that there is a left and a right, and I was pick them up and I position them in air. How do I know which one's the left or the right? I always think about if I was wearing them like glasses. Okay, so if I was wearing them like glasses, this is really the only way that they could fit if I wore them like glasses, and the hip socket has to be on the outside, and the nose of my glasses, and the obturator for Raymond has to. So if I were to have this on the table and I said, is this the left or the right, and you picked it up, I'm like, well, if this was my monocle and I wanted to look like a moose, this is how I would wear it. Honest to God, every single time I try to figure it out in space, that's what I do. I try really hard to not pick it up and put it on like they're glasses, but I do. Okay? So, yep, hey, it's a thing. In the other video, I didn't do this, but there are 3 parts to, and they even consider them 3 bones, even though they fuse together. So there's 3 segments to each pelvic bone. There is the ilium. The ilium looks like an elephant ear. So ilium and elephant ear. It's the ridge. Okay, if you put your thumb right here and you can feel your hip bone, that's called the iliac crest. It's part of the ilium. We have a whole bunch of butt muscles that attach to the back, that what we call the iliac fossa, that's on the posterior side, and we've got an indentation on the front. All I would want you to be able to do is say what part of the pelvis is this big flat section, and it is the ilium. There's this section down here that when you sit, when someone sits on your lap and you think they have a bony butt, what you're feeling is the ischium. Okay? All right, so again, because I am an idiot, this is called the ischial tuberosity. So ilium is the elephant ear. The ischium is your sit bones. Okay? So your ischium is your sit bones. Go ahead. Ischium is your sit bones, if you know. So your sit bones is what I said, right? And then in the front, this section here that joins in the front with the other part here. Okay, so this is right here in the front. It's called your pubis. And if you can't put that thought together in your own head, I'm not going to do it for you. Okay, so the pubis is where the 2 bones join in the front. And on a lot of your diagrams and images, they show this little piece of cartilage. And it's called the pubic symphysis. Okay? This pubic symphysis allows for there to be a little bit when you move and when you do some like stretching. There's a little bit of movement allowed when you have cartilage like this. And in childbirth, it's super important because it allows for the hips to open a little. Okay? In one of your readings, there were some questions about the difference between male and female pubic or pelvises. There's a really important arch right here, and it's called the pubic arch. All right? In a male, this pubic arch, this triangle that's made right here, is less than 90 degrees. Okay, men have narrower pelvises. In a female pelvis, so I'm going to put my glasses on again. Okay, so if this were a male pelvis, it would be less than 90. So that angle right there is a smaller angle. And in a female pelvis, it's more spread out like that. Okay, when we spread it out, we also angle the socket out towards the front a little bit more. So female and male physical therapist, or a physical therapist would be able to tell you this, an orthopedic surgeon would be able to tell you this, that the hip function between males and females is a little different. If you ever watch runners, distance runners, girls are more likely to run a little knock-kneed. Guys are more likely to run with their knees in front of them, where girls are going to go knock-kneed a little bit. It's because girls' hips are rotated a little bit further forward, and our hip anatomy, our hip geometry is a little different. And so because of that, they kind of point it a little bit more. We're not necessarily pigeon-toed, but when we run, we have a tendency to put our knees in. Just the geometry of our hips, okay? So males, that pubic arch is narrow, and in females, it's a little bit more open because our pelvic brim is designed for childbirth. The pelvic circle, or the way that it's arranged, a male pelvis is more like a cone, where a female pelvis is more like a bowl. Okay? So there's a couple of differences there. So if they were to find a skeleton out in the woods that had been there for a long time, they would go, oh, it was a boy. Because of they could look at the pelvic arch and know right away if it was a male or if it was a female, just by looking at that pelvic arch and how much, if it's more there or less than 90 degrees, okay? So we have ilium, ischium, pubis. This is the obturator foramen. It's the biggest foramen in the body. Part of what the obturator foramen's job is just to make the pelvis lighter.
Wait, why is there just like that hole there?
Well, part of it is so that it's lighter. Imagine how much heavier you would be if you had this much more compact bone.
How heavy are bones usually? Does it depend on the person?
Yeah, it depends on how big the person is, and, okay? Now, the other really, really important feature of this is this socket, okay? The socket for a ball and socket joint is where the head of the femur fits. The socket is called the acetabulum. And the acetabulum, the socket for the ball and socket joint of the hip, is, if you look at a colored model, like on Get Body Smart, you'll see the ilium, the ischium, and the pubis all kind of join in this acetabulum. Acetabulum looks like the word acetabellum, and I've heard people say acetabellum, and I've heard them say acetabulum, okay? So I didn't talk about the pelvis in your video, but that was a quick review of it. Oh, and we didn't see the, my legs are so sore. So this being down there is not cool. Okay, patella.
Okay.
Way too many lunges. Okay, the patella is the kneecap. And the way the kneecap attaches, so all of the other bones kind of fit together like a puzzle, and it looks like the patella or the kneecap floats. You have all of your quadricep muscles. They join into a patellar tendon. They attach to the superior ridge, and then there's another tendon that attaches at the bottom that attaches to your tibia. And when your quadricep muscles contract, so when they shorten, your leg straightens. And when it relaxes and your hamstring muscles contract, your knee bends, okay? When we talk about joints, a lot of that'll make sense.
I was gonna say last year when I had like surgery, I don't know if like anybody had class with me, but like my knee, like my patella tendon was like my patella wasn't in place, so I could move it like up and
Oh.
down.
Stop. I remember when you
That's
did that.
so disgusting.
Like that wasn't in place.